Welcome to the Kemper Old Boy Network Podcast. My name is David Flores, class of 1993. Today we have a real special guest for you guys. I know a lot of you guys have been tuning in from the years in the 1990s, and you know our guest, and you have good memories of him. Along with me is our co-host, Thom Johnson, and he's going to be kind of running the show today, and lead us into the conversation. So you want to take over, Thom?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thank you very much. Dave is joining us remotely real quick from Kingsville, Texas, right? Yeah, I was going to say, so his connection, we'll edit out what we can or whatever, so it may be a little patchy, so bear with us, but I am very excited. Oh, wait, let me do some admin notes here real quick, everybody. We are very looking forward to our reunion in October. I am super excited. We missed last year. So for our KOBN listeners, we are very excited to actually to have the opportunity to get together once again at the Alma Mater in Boonville, Missouri. As a famous man once said, located on the limestone bluffs overlooking the murky Missouri River at 701 3rd Street, Boonville, Missouri, 65233, I think is the zip code, but I'm not sure. So maybe not. Anyways, beyond that, also like to shout out to the Alumni Association for doing a remarkable job a few weeks ago now with getting everything back into the museum after the fire, or the building fire, two doors down from the actual museum itself. Huge props to everybody there. Thank you so much for the hard work. Everybody, it doesn't go unnoticed. We see it 100%. And that's about all I can say as far as that. Now, I'll get to, guys, one of my personal favorite instructors, teachers, one of my favorite memories from Kemper Military School was a teacher, mentor, principal, a man of many hats, including a disciplinarian and many different things. Everybody, please welcome our guest, Greg Early, to the KOBN Network Podcast. Thank you, Greg, for being here. And how was your 4th of July?
Very, very good. Spent some time with family and friends out in the country, backyard barbecue, swimming pool, fireworks display. It was red, white, and blue all the way across the board. We had a fantastic celebration. So yeah, it was great. And I hope yours was the same. Oh
yeah. I mean, other than I'm a few dollars short from my children, just, I don't know, their pyrotechnic fantasy or fetish or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. It was pretty good.
You raised them well, brother. You raised them well.
Yeah. I had to put the stop, one of them. Yeah, all fingers. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, we everybody's got them. I did have to put the kibosh, the old sparklers with the metal rods. They must have overheard me with the conversation previously, and they thought they would try to engineer a pipe bomb out of one of them. And I was like, "Whoa, stop! Pull the brakes. We're gonna not do that." So, we're let's keep this PG here. So, but other than that, only real issue I almost had. So yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for being on here, Greg. I guess we can dive a little bit in. How about, let's dive a little bit into this. Will you give us an overview or a bio of your life and what kind of led you to Kemper, and what have you been doing since then? And then we'll dive into the Kemper years itself here after we talk about that. But for some of our listeners that may not be familiar from the early 80s and 70s and stuff like that, they may not know you personally, and I would like everybody to get kind of a snapshot into who Greg Early is.
Yeah, thanks, Thom. So never went to the same school or lived in the same house for more than 3 years at a time since I drew my first breath until I graduated from high school. My dad was an Air Force pilot, And we traveled around, lived in Japan for 3 years as a kid, following his deployment in Vietnam in 1968. There flew myself, my two siblings, I'm the youngest of three, and we flew to Japan and lived with on the air base in Misawa, Japan, for 3 years. And then coming back to the States, bounced around in Kansas City. My parents divorced when I was 13. My mom moved us to Houston, Texas, where I went to high school, came back to Missouri to go to college, got an education degree, and about 6 months after graduating from college, I had this thought of military school. I knew a kid in college that went to St. John's Military Academy in Salina, Kansas, and I remember spending quite a bit of time talking with him about his experience as a cadet there, and I thought, I wonder what it'd be like to teach at a military school. And one day on break, I found my way thumbing through the yellow pages. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember what those are. And MMA in Mexico was a school that was up and running, and Wentworth over there in Lexington was up and running, and Kemper was up and running at that time. And when I got to Kemper Military School, the Dean of Academics actually answered the telephone and invited me in for an interview. And I was hired in June of 1988 at the ripe young age of 22. So I signed my first teaching contract at 22, and I was at Kemper from June of 88 until the school closed in 2002, with a couple of breaks in between, which if you want to hear about, I'll tell you. But the long story short, I spent the bulk of my career as an educator, both as a classroom teacher and administrator, right there on campus at Kemper. So long-term familiarity with the school, the kids, the culture, and everything about it.
Now, you are married, got a couple kids.
Yep.
Were you married before going to Kemper, or did you meet your wife while you were teaching? Or how?
My wife, her name is Christy, and Christy and I met as college students at Mizzou. We have two children. Our oldest is now 27, who lives in Houston, Texas, interestingly enough, now, and the youngest is 23 and lives here in Columbia. Both are Mizzou alum and gainfully employed, praise God. And Christy and I are officially empty nesters, and all we care for now are a couple of cats and a geriatric Labrador Retriever.
Well, all right, fair enough. And then let's see, what are you currently doing?
Great. So when the school closed in 2002, I had the opportunity to jump into the business world, and I did, and 10 years went by. And following the mortgage collapse in 2008 and the roller coaster ride that came after that, I found myself right back in the classroom. So I currently teach high school science over in New Franklin, just right across the Boonville Bridge in Howard County. And I've been there for 6. I'm about to start my 7th year, and I'm still working with high school students, and I couldn't be more happy doing that.
Awesome. Now we'll go kind of dive a little bit into the early years of Kemper. You said 1988. So
yes, sir.
Ronald Reagan still the president, or was it George Bush?
Yep.
By the way? Okay. Reagan's still the president. Everything is the culture of the 1980s at the end of the Reagan administration was very patriotic, pro red, white, and blue. And yeah, I was going to say, I know we went through that weird thing. I was going to say, what was your experience around, I know you can't speak as a whole for Americana, but maybe as the student body, what was your experience with the kids in the 1988 time frame, how they felt, as well as what position were you hired to do? What were you teaching? That kind of stuff. We talk about the early years.
I was hired on initially as a junior high and high school science teacher. I taught grades 7 through 12. I was one of 2 science teachers on campus. My classroom was room 203 in Science Hall, now occupied by the State Fair Community College. And I still, every time I drive by, it kind of gives me a chance to kind of cringe a little bit. But nonetheless, I was 203 Science Hall, and I taught 7th grade life science, 8th grade earth science, 9th grade physical science, 10th grade bio 1, 11th grade biology 2 and 12th grade anatomy and physiology. I had that number of preps every day. There was one other science teacher that taught at the high school level back then in the late 80s, with a couple of rotations of people coming and going. But long and short, it was a full plate. And so back to your initial question. The students of the late 80s compared to the students of today, and I think if you depending upon where you are, like in Cooper County, Howard County, Boone County, they're very much the same. They're just kind of they're groovy, they're cool, they're weird, they're quirky, they're dorks, they're badass, they're all of that. And so were the cadets at Kemper, same thing. So not a lot of difference between the students of then and the students of today. We're all Americans, and there you have it. There you are.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent. I didn't know. Yeah, if there was Kemper went through its own morphosing here and there a little bit, and the people that would go to Kemper, I'm sure, I was going to say, in the 90s, maybe they're a little bit more late 90s or towards the closer to the close of the school, may have been there for more disciplinary reasons, whereas I thought maybe that the kids from the 80s were more of a, hey, this is a prep school, or this is a stair-step process, or like you were going to.
Yeah. No, I'd say that, the first group of cadets that I worked with, I would agree. I think the mix of who was there because they wanted to be versus who was there because they had to be, i.e. parental choice mainly, it was probably 50-50. But as time went on, I remember as an administrator doing a self-study for our accreditation body. 84% of the first year cadets later in the game were there against their will in their first year. Their mom and dad said, hey, this is where you're going, end of story. Second year cadets was about 50-50, and third year cadets and beyond, they were all there because that's where they wanted to go to school. And so as you watch the students come through their experience, the longer they stayed, the better the more they liked it and the more they appreciated what exactly was going on here. And it turned out to be a really, really wonderful experience for them. And staying connected with students that are now your age and older, they have success stories that most people would drool over.
Greg, something that just kind of came to mind. I was, having taught in the military school environment and in the public school environment, the dynamics, are I would think completely different between the student life, right? You get in public schools, you got kids living at home, and maybe they're working a job or that sort of thing. And then in military school, you have the structure of the military school and the sort of self-diplomacy and self-policing that occurs within that environment. How did you see that? How did it affect academics, in your opinion?
I'm going to ask you to ask me that same question in a different way. I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at. Are you talking about how do the students in a private boarding school achieve academically versus those in a public school? Is that what you're getting at?
Not necessarily. More in terms of how did the culture of a military school affect the academic part of the life of the student versus somebody that's going to a public school?
Okay, good question. What I saw, not only as a classroom teacher but as an administrator, the culture at Kemper was one that not only strived for, but celebrated academic success. So if a cadet / student wasn't performing the way that he or she should, they were motivated and encouraged by their peers, and not always in a negative way. I don't mean that by drop down and give me 20, but to say, come on, dude, you got more than this. I mean, let's get it on. I mean, some students when they came to Kemper, their main goal was to prove to their parents that they could fail at our school for X number of dollars a year just as easily as they could at home for free, as a way of kind of playing the card of, come and get me, this isn't working. And we often told mom and dad in advance, don't be surprised if your kid plays this card. Just give it some time, and you'll see that they'll come around, and they'll find that they'll see that doing well has a lasting, significant, measurable, meaningful, positive consequence, and it always does.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. When we think about, the words that we use in a military environment, military school environment, things like, the standard of honor, character, honor, integrity, all those things translate into a better student. It just does naturally, I think.
Right. I mean, even the Kemper crest has the Latin logo at the lower end of the shield that says simply "non quam non patatus," translated literally "never not prepared." If you took that into the English, just modern English, it would be something that would read "always ready." And if someone can actually embrace that, if someone can honestly say that they are, quote, always ready, end quote, that they are never not prepared, end quote, that's a pretty bold statement. And if that was the goal, the lofty aspiration, the forefathers of what I love to refer as my beloved military school, I'm behind that every day of the week.
And it's interesting how you say that the peer environment motivated for success as well, negative and positive, and that's fine. I'm sure in the public schools you see a little bit of that, like amongst high school athletes. If there's an athlete struggling, but he's a star performer on said whatever, his friends are going to be like, apply that pressure and be like, bud, what can I do to help you out? Because we need you, that kind of stuff. Do you see how much of a not delusional, but is it diluted at all at a civilian level or outside of that environment? Or do you see it being as effective in how to replicate that in modern day environment? I guess is what I'm asking.
I think, yeah. Well, the best, a parallel analogy that I can think of is in the realm of athletics. So take your baseball team, your basketball team, your softball team, your cross country track, where you have student athletes that are trying to achieve at a high level, and they want to win a district championship. They want to win a conference championship. They want to go to the state contest. And if you have the right chemistry of personalities and athleticism, you're going to see that same dynamic. The difference is at Kemper, the cadets had the luxury of encouraging each other within their own tight-knit community. They weren't always doing that with mom and dad on the corner or coach in the batting cage. I mean, they had this whole esprit de corps within their own student body that's really, really hard to replicate anywhere else.
Yeah, I think part of that is that, we lived with each other 24/7. It was like, you couldn't escape.
Yeah, exactly. Warts and all, man. Warts and all.
We were all in the same petri dish, so to speak. Let's see. Well, let's go on with that. So how long were you a student teacher before you took more of an administrative role?
Yeah. Okay, so from 1988 to 1993, I was a principal. I was a primary classroom teacher. And at the end of the 1993 school year, I had this notion. Again, I signed my first teaching contract at 22. So I'm still very young in my adult life. I'm young in my professional career. And at the end of the 93 school year, my wife, Christy, was pregnant with our first child. And I decided to leave Kemper and go pursue something else. I thought, okay, I got this. What else can I do? So I left the school and went to work for an insurance company, which I hated. A year later, I thought, I'm not going to retire as an insurance agent. And the teacher of the school hired to replace me. The cadets just basically chewed this girl up and spit her out. And when I walked back in and said, hey, what are the chances I can come back and resume my duties? The position was open and they welcomed me back with open arms. And shortly after that, 94, 95, I walked into the interim dean's office and I said, hey, you know what? I think the high school, junior high school guy, the junior high and high school cadets, they need administrative representation. The teachers need administrative leadership. And instead of, all we had at the time was the dean. That was it. He was the only academic administrator on campus. And when I walked in and suggested we should introduce a junior high and high school administrator, he said, well, who do you have in mind? And I said, me, I'll do it. And so 2 years later, over the course of the next 2 years, I got my master's degree in secondary educational admin and then took over gradually stepping out of the classroom environment. And I'll drop some names here. You remember Thom, Jeff Barber, and Brian Hopkins. Mm-hmm. So Jeff came in before Brian did. Brian came in and took over a period of 1 year. He took, or maybe 2 years, he took over for me completely, teaching high school science, as well as he taught, both of those guys taught at the JUCO level as well. And I transitioned out of the classroom completely into an administrative role and stayed in that same capacity until 1999.
So before we go too far ahead, what was Kemper lacking at the high school level that made you want to seek administrative representation at the high school level? What was your thought process behind that that led you down that direction?
That's a great question. Well, as a student coming through my entire experience growing up, all the way through my collegiate experience, I had never been in a junior high or high school environment that didn't have some kind of educational leadership. And I'm not suggesting, please don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not suggesting that the dean of academics was not an administrative leader that was concerned or otherwise directly involved in what was going on with grades 7 through 12. But by and large, the dean of academics was primarily concerned with what was going on at the junior college level and what was happening kind of ad hoc at a really big kind of oceanfront perspective. And I felt like we needed, not to be too tongue-in-cheek, but we needed boots on the ground down there in Science Hall. We needed boots on the ground in D barracks and A barracks and K barracks, where all these tuition-paying, formative 13 to 18-year-old young men and women, they needed someone to help put it all together. And I, for whatever reason, I thought I was the best guy for the job.
Well, no, I mean, in my experience, and I know I'm pretty biased, but it was an amazing experience. You know, looking back on it and, a couple decades later,
yeah,
and not that I mean to, but in being out in the outside world, I look down on other people's experiences because I had such an amazing one at that role. Like, yeah, there was so much stuff I would have never had the opportunity at a regular public high school to be able to. You don't get a philosophy and logic class, and you don't get a Greek and literature class or Shakespearean literature class in high school. That doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. You know, there's like certain clubs, sure, but not formal instruction. What were your administrative difficulties? I know that there had to be a balance at the state level with academic requirements and trying to maintain Kemper's requirements. Was that a difficult step at all, or was that fairly easy to go through?
No, it was very seamless. So Kemper was accredited by the Northeast Association, which was a body of the University of Missouri. We were not accredited by the state of Missouri per se, like a public school.
Okay.
But we were accredited so that the diploma that a student received was recognized as authoritative and appropriate anywhere that person would take that diploma. So it wasn't like, well, to say that you're not accredited is to suggest that the educational programming that you're declaring might be less than. Well, Kemper was fully accredited, and throughout my tenure there from 88 to 2002, maintained accreditation in good standing. And it was pretty easy to maintain that. We just had to show that we had a rigorous curriculum. We had qualified certified instructors. We had, we taught algebra and Spanish and bio and all you fill in the usual blanks with the appropriate content. And if you could do that, you got your stamp of accreditation, and down the road you went.
I knew we were better off I felt like we were better off than most, because coming from Nebraska with the public education system, I never stepped foot into a Nebraska high school, but just due to the fact at one point I was enrolled in a system that was very archaic. When I graduated Kemper, I went off into the military or whatever, and then my mom, I called home, and I was down in Fort Benning, Georgia, and she called me and she was like, "I got your diploma today." And I was like, "Mom, I gave it to you before I left or whatever, stuff like that." She was like, "No, the state of Nebraska sent you a graduation diploma," and I never stepped foot. So I know at the time, states didn't have a really rigorous, accreditation thing, and I just didn't. I got a diploma from the state of Nebraska from Southeast High School in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I never stepped foot in a classroom a day in my life. And I was like, I don't know what category they put me in. That's mind blowing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is it hanging on the wall, bro? Is it where is it? I can't see it behind you.
I think that was part of the reason why I went to Kemper Military School. Is my mother was not impressed with the state education system, and she was one of those mothers going to regional school board meetings and throwing up the BS flag and saying WTF. She was the one what the hell are you doing? Yeah. She's her own special lady. That's her own thing. She's gangster in her own way, but yeah, she didn't. You were going to be educated. That's the way the world works. So. You said you took did you take a break?
Hey, Thom.
Yeah.
Thom, hold on 1 second. I just got a text message from Scott Dobbins.
Okay.
He goes, I expect a special shout out. So here's my shout out to my brother, Scott Dobbins. Scott's listening. And here's this is a really interesting, a nuance that I know that both of you guys will completely appreciate. When you spend even 1 year on campus in a boarding school environment, you get very connected to everyone around you very quickly and very strongly. And those relationships last the rest of your life. And that's true even for those of us that were working in a teaching / administrative capacity. We got to know you guys really, really well. And the relationship bonds that we form extend even now. I mean, Thom, how old are you?
41. Yeah, something like that.
I've known you since you were 15, right?
Yep.
and I'm 55. Scott Dobbins, my friend that just sent me a text message requesting this shout out. I hope he's grinning from ear to ear right now. I've known him since he was 14, and he's older than you. And we maintain these relationships even to this day. The cadets that were seniors in high school, when my first year there as a classroom teacher in 1988, they're pushing 50, bro, and I'm 55. It's crazy.
You make 55 look good, though, dude.
Hey,
you're coming in solid.
Be nice, brother.
Right
be
on.
Nice.
Right on.
All right, on with the show.
Okay. Yeah. Now that Scott got his shout out. All right. Shout out, Scott. What up?
Yeah. There you go.
So 99. Did you take a break in 99? Did you say, and then came back, or what happened?
Yeah, I did. Thanks for bringing that up. So, like I said, when I went through graduate school and earned my secondary admin degree. At the end of, or 2 years later, I got my master's and earned it between 1995 and 1997. And then from 97 to 99 was my 2-year stint as a full-time junior high and high school administrator, no classroom teaching responsibilities. And in 99, I had this crazy notion, hey, once again, I came to a second spot in my professional career and thought, okay, am I going to stay here the rest of my career, or am I going to go do something else? And an opportunity came up to go serve as a public high school administrator in a small town in northern Boone County, Sturgeon, Missouri. And I was Sturgeon's high school principal from 1999 to 2001. And over that 2-year period, it was a long drive. I live in Boone County. I don't live in Columbia proper, but I drove approximately 45 miles one way to get to work each day for 2 years. And as a rural high school principal with board meetings and basketball games and everything else was going on. And meanwhile, I'm still in touch with the then president of Kemper, Dr. Ed Ridgely. And he and I maintained contact over the course of those 2 years. And at the end of my second year up in Sturgeon, I came to Dr. Ridgely and said, "Hey, do you need some help in the summertime? I've got some free time. I'd love to come in and see what I can do to help." And when I came back into the campus environment, I basically fell back in love with the school that I never fell out of love with, and decided to go ahead and rejoin the staff. Dr. Ridgely wanted me back. I wanted to come back. And so I came back to Kemper in 2001 and was there to see the flag come down in May of 2002.
Okay, yeah, let's jump in.
Well, just want to ask you quick, from an administrative perspective, we were all kind of, we had left by then and we were looking from the outside in. Those final years, what did you see happening at Kemper that kind of led to the school closing down?
Well, let me go all the way back to 1844, if I can, just for a bit. If you look at the history of the school and the men that ran it from day one, F.T. Kemper, T.A. Johnston, A.M. Hitch, we had a 113-year period of time where the school was led by 3 men, Kemper, Johnston, and Hitch. Johnston was a student of Kemper's, and Hitch was a student of Johnston's. And these men, they were academicians. They weren't colonels. And I'm no disrespect to the men in uniform. I love those guys. And Thom, I tip my hat. Thank you for your service to our country.
I was just happy to have a job. That's it.
Hey, but still, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So, F.T. Kemper had this kind of eye-opening moment when he realized, hey, I can run back then, 1844 was prior to the public school movement. If you look at the history of American education, public schools weren't around in 1844. So FT opens his school right there in the heart of Boonville. Johnston comes along and blows it up and realizes that the military school model is something that will add value to what's going on in the business plan. Hitch comes through and just completes the work that Johnston started, but you had a 113-year period where 3 guys ran the show. Well, when old man Hitch, I don't say that disrespectfully in any way, shape, or form, but Hitch is dying in the house that we then called the Hitch House. And T.A. Johnston's son, H.C. Johnston, he's the superintendent, and everyone thinks, well, shoot, Hitch is going to step down, HC is going to take over, and we're just going to keep on going. Well, HC takes all of his toys off the playground and he leaves. He cashes in. It's a privately owned kind of stock-like company, and it's a for-profit organization, and HC takes all of his goods and leaves when Hitch dies. And everybody's looking around going, holy cow, what are we going to do now? And then they go to 501c3 board of trustees. And when the trustees come on, again, no disrespect intended whatsoever, but the board of trustees all of a sudden thought, well, we need a military man to run this school. And when they started hiring retired colonels, and the number of presidents that followed from Hitch until the closure, you can't even count them. If I'd need a roster to read off the number of guys that served in those roles. So, the demise of the school began in the 1950s, and it just, because the asset base was so high. I mean, shoot, Kemper owned most of all the properties on 3rd Street, and instead of the multi-million-dollar endowments that you see at MMA and some other East Coast military schools, their holdings were chiefly in real estate, and then they gradually, that just with enrollments going down and maintenance costs going up, and the rest is history. It took a long time to slide down that hill, but eventually that the school hit the bottom. The board said enough's enough, and the flag came down.
That's very interesting, especially when you look at it from a business standpoint. Where the writing was kind of inevitable, it's on the wall. Plus, you talk about insurance liability and everything else in modern day business, like trying to run a boarding school under that type of structure is so difficult in modern day that it's almost impossible.
Oh,
you can't.
Yeah, and just think back in your own experience of what K barracks looked like, and what the roof leaks in A and D barracks, and if you had to start over again, it's a multi-million-dollar project trying to get those buildings back up to standard and code. I mean, it's a hugely problematic.
Yeah, and asbestos and Lord knows what else, I mean, all that stuff. And then just, the model, like, what we call assault today is completely different than what it was back then.
Oh, no question. No question.
You cannot physically touch anybody other than, okay, that's like assault. And there's just no way to run an environment without, and I'm not saying beating or anything like that, but things get physical, and you put that much testosterone in one confined space, lack of better terms, shit's gonna pop off. I mean, like, something's gonna happen, and there's no way you could run without massive supervision everywhere and then you got a massive staff that you're keeping on board, and then are you paying that staff well enough? What kind of staff are you attracting? All that business model is very difficult to replicate.
Absolutely.
Unless you have the financial means of very wealthy students.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
What were some, although the writing was on the wall, what were some of your personal feelings as the doors were shutting and the flag was being lowered?
I was mad. I was surprised. It literally came out of left field. My wife and family and I were on vacation in the summer, and I came home. This is back in 2002, prior to the advent of text messaging and social media contacts that we have today. I came home to a telephone recorder full of messages, saying, "Hey, Greg, call me," from Colonel Challender and other folks, that, "Hey, there's some big stuff going on. Call me. You need to know what's happening over here." So it was not something that I was anticipating. We were getting ready for another summer school program, and I was just taking a week off to go get some fresh air and rejuvenate a little bit before I jump right back in onto summer school and getting ready for the next school year. So the whole range of emotion was associated with learning that the school was going to close, and but it was a done deal, and so all I could do is accept it and then decide, what am I going to do next?
You talked a little bit about it. You talked kind of with your experience of why you went to a military school, but and with your college roommate from St. John's and whatnot, what attracted you to teaching, molding, and mentoring young minds as a whole? I mean, what was the thing? Now, I can kind of, if you were raised by a military father, I kind of get it, because it's very instructional no matter what you do. I'm constantly instructing my kids, so I can kind of imagine that's where some of it came from. But what was it that you're like, you know what, I want to be a damn high school teacher?
Honestly, great question. My dad, when I finished my second year of college at Mizzou, at the end of my sophomore year, I was still an undeclared major.
Okay.
And my father sat me down and said that his first best word whenever he wanted to pin me to the floor was "son." So he said, "Son, what are you going to do?" And he goes, "We have a couple options. You can choose a degree plan. You can learn a trade, join the military. Listen, what do you want to do?" And I was honest with him. I said, I don't really know what I want to do. And he asked me the great question of, well, what do you like to do? And I started teaching when I was 13 at a public swimming pool in Marshall, Missouri, where my father lived at the time. And I signed on as a volunteer with the American Red Cross, and I taught beginning swimming as a volunteer at age 13. I was on their payroll at age 14. I got my lifeguarding certificate when I was 15, my WSI when I was 17, and I was training lifeguards by the time I was 18, and I did it all the way through college. And what I like to do is teach. And my dad said, "Well, what's your favorite subject?" And I said, "Biology." And he goes, "Well, why don't you be a biology teacher?" And I said, "Okay." And that was it. And once I got my degree in grades 7 through 12 biology instruction, once again, because I graduated in December, and schools don't usually hire until the early part of the spring, I had several months to just kind of kick tires, and I was working at a grocery store. And one day while I was eating lunch, I was close enough to the store I worked in. I was able to walk home for lunch, and I'm eating a turkey sandwich at the kitchen table there in my apartment. And I thought, it was a flashback to my college friend Art Maynard, and I thought, military school. And when I splayed open the yellow pages, there it was. And I called Kemper, and Dr. Richmond answered. I got an interview, and he hired me. And I thought, okay, here we go. I mean, it was really just a matter of being at the right place at the right time. I didn't pursue it for any other reason than I thought it was freaking cool as hell. And when I first was like, well, I'm walking around on campus and I'm seeing these young studs military cadets. I'm like, this is badass. I fell in love with it, and the rest is history.
That is awesome, and it's awesome that you chose the path of a military school. That's it's very difficult, or not a lot of people do that. It's not. Yeah, I was going to say most people coming out of college with as teachers and after their teaching certificates and everything aren't like, you know what? I don't want to go try to find a boarding school.
True. No, but like I said, I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Let me see here. And I think we covered attracting to military school. So so coming out of college, you are a teacher. They got you on this filtered version of what teacher is by college, and you never really know until you're there. You know, I mean, it's kind of like, it's trial by fire. I mean, bottom line, it is. So how did your interactions those first years with cadets change your perspective on the most influencing kids effectively in order to them to achieve what you're trying to have them achieve, i.e. education?
Again, great question. And let me come at it two ways. Number one, all of the educational theory that we are taught at the university level, I shouldn't say all. Let me eliminate the word all and start over and say this. The educational theory that we're taught at the university level carries a lot of weight and a lot of validity. So thinking your way through a teaching dynamic, the theory that goes into it is important to know and understand. Being a good communicator does not include any of it, right?
Right.
So I'm in the classroom early in my first year. I'm 23 years old. I'm in front of a group of seventh grade boys. There weren't any seventh grade girls in 1988. My classroom of seventh graders were all boys. And I'm at the chalkboard. Here's how long ago this was. I'm at the chalkboard. And if my friend Terry Kegris was listening in, he would remember how much chalk dust I used to wear on my military uniform that they issued me and gave me the honorary rank of captain. I walked around with chalk dust on my pants, so much so it made Colonel Little insane. It was like, your uniform, what are you doing? Dude, I'm a teacher. What do you think? So anyway, I remember slapping chalk on the board one day, and it dawned on me, it just like a switch in my head, I got flipped, and I'm like, I stopped thinking about what I was going to say, and I started thinking about what they're going to hear. And it was a complete paradigm shift for me as an educator. And it's been that way for me ever since. Even for this particular experience, I read what you sent me one time, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to let him control the conversation. And I'm not going to worry about what I'm going to say. I'm going to worry about what you're going to hear. And that has guided me as an educator and an administrator for all of my career. And likewise as a parent and as a friend.
That's an interesting, I was going to say, that's a little bit of a tidbit life lesson for anybody listening in. That's a pretty good gem right there to put in the toolkit. So I like that.
Yeah. Good.
I like the philosophy versus what are they going to hear versus what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in a very polar environment that we are in today, I think everybody should probably listen to that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think
one thing that go ahead, please.
I think what it does is it gives us an approach to, put the lens before we speak, right? So we're, whatever we say, we're putting into the lens of our audience. if we think of it that way. So we communicate much better because, you're taking into account, all the different variables of how it's going to be received.
Right. Well, one thing that Thom asked me by text, and I don't want to get in front of your line of questioning, Thom, but one of the questions that you asked me was, how did my experience at Kemper affect my personal life, right? My life here at home, and I have to say, just to honor my wife, who's she's in the other room. She always felt like she got the leftovers, right? That there was a period of time when I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was on campus while the cadets were getting out of bed, and I was there when now I only did one block of evening study. So Thursday nights I was there until 9 o'clock, and I'm not home until 10, and back up again at 4 and gone. So I had these 5-day weeks when I was just absent from home, and when I got home was kind of my downtime, and so I gave a lot to my experience at school, and it cost a lot for my experience at home. So as much as it was a labor of love, and I mean that in every sense of the word, it cost my family something too, which I'm not exactly sure how to measure.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I can relate to that very much, about giving your profession so much that you lose perspective of the most important thing in your world is your family. And yeah, I very much relate to that. So that's why I asked you that question. I remember you, Greg, early, always on campus, always working with us, always being there, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember thinking, like, yeah, now looking back on it, especially, I remember at the time too, thinking like, man, he's here all the time, but looking back on it now, raising my own family and stuff, and having those situations of not being there, being the guy that pays the bills, but the guy that's not really the father of the house, and that kind of, thank goodness that my boys have an amazing mother who raised them, and now I'm the football coach and the Little League baseball coach and all that stuff. But for all those years of their lives, that was absent. And yeah, I that's why I had to hear, or I thought of it from my own perspective, and I wanted to hear your perspective on that too, because you gave an incredible amount of your energy to that. And so I just wanted to hear that. I wanted to personally thank you for everything that you did. And thank your family too for allowing us. This is their husband and their father, and because I think you are very much a father figure to a lot more than just your own family. But I don't want that. I don't want to belittle your family, because you are the most important. That's the most important aspect of who you are as well. So I don't know. I hope that came out right.
No. Thank you very much, Thom. And like I said, it was and continues to be a labor of love, and I would do it all over again if I could.
Okay, so there is no natural way to transition into this. So we're just going to segue right into it. You are a guitar player. You are a musician. You sing. Some students are familiar. I know Halkovic was a drummer. You sang and played guitar, and I can't remember who else was in the band with you guys, but you guys.
Brian Hopkins.
Brian was in there? Okay.
Yep.
Was he playing bass? Was he slapping bass, or was he?
No, man. He was playing the Fender Strat and shredding it.
Okay, all right.
We didn't have a bass player. Palkey was pounding the drum kit. Brian was on the Fender Strat, and I was behind the mic.
Alrighty. So, and we know, but I will ask the question: who's your favorite band?
Oh, dude, come on.
I know, but you got to say it, not me. This is a podcast. So.
Okay, it's the three guys. Well, unfortunately, we lost an important member of the band not too long ago, but the three-man band from Canada, Rush.
Favorite album all time? Well, it's hard to do a song, so
It is.
because you can't. That's all subjective. Favorite album?
Presto.
Okay, that's a pretty solid one. So,
It is.
I mean, I think if I was to say a song, I'd have to go with Tom Sawyer because it's infamous. But God, it's so hard, you know.
Yeah, it is. Well, and again, my second go-to has got to be Hemispheres. There is an instrumental piece on the Hemispheres record called La Villa Straggiato, and if one of my friends and colleagues named Thom Reese, who was a teacher with me as a young student, I'd love to tell you a story, but I'd have to use some pretty salty language to share it. Thom introduced me to La Villa Straggiato, and it is so damn good. It's like 10 minutes of face melting music. I mean, it's incredible. So anybody that's not checked it out, just Google it, YouTube it, whatever you do, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. You can find a copy. It's badass. You'll love it. I promise.
Other musical influences let's not go with Kemper. Let's just say musical influences growing up and college years, formative college years.
I grew up on Southern rock. I was ZZ Top, 38 Special, Molly Hatchet, Blackfoot, classic rock, Styx, Kansas Foreigner, REO Speedwagon, all those guys. My father was a country music guy, as was his father, my grandpa. So Willie Nelson's been a mainstay for me, Hank Williams Jr., Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, you name it, all those guys. I also kind of I'm recently really enjoying modern day bluegrass. There's some really, really good groups. The Punch Brothers, Old Salt Union, Sam Bush. My wife and I have enjoyed some outdoor live music concerts over the years, and I've seen some guys that you'd never hear on the radio. And as I say to students today, the best music out there is not being played on the radio. And
well, record labels, the whole industry changed so much. It's so difficult for musicians to be musicians. Yeah. It's a very sad time. And I think maybe we will find our way out of it, but basically musicians don't have a way to be musicians for a living anymore. It's very difficult. Yeah. And what you are getting is homogenized sound that's being mass produced and whatever, and just the business model behind it. And a lot of it has to do with Napster and the downloading, and now we're streaming, and it's very complex. But the people who are actually musically talented, you're just not seeing them anymore. And it's because they have to have real jobs. Yeah. They don't have the days of you peddling mixtapes and CDs out of your, or whatever, records even, from days previous, out of the back of your van or whatever. Those days are gone. You used to be able to make a living doing that, but that whole thing is gone now. So anybody that may have a little bit of talent or whatever, they all have day jobs and they all play in their garage with their friends, but you don't ever actually hear their stuff.
Yeah.
There are local bars on Friday and Saturday night, and that's all you hear. And
well, I still play. I've got a 6-string acoustic, and I enjoy that. I just recently have gotten into playing the baritone ukulele, which is just the lower 4 strings on the 6-string guitar, but the chord progressions or the chord positions are the same. Okay. And I really enjoy that. It's a great instrument to travel with. Mandolin, I haven't pulled it off the wall in a while, but that was an instrument that I really enjoyed getting to know and better understand. The Native American wind flute is another thing that I've recently picked up and just kind of experimented with, and that's a lot of fun. Very special, super cool around the campfire when the stars are out. So music's been an important part of my life as long as I can remember, and I attribute to my father. I give my dad credit for that.
That's awesome. Well, now let's do another unnatural transition, but I'll force it. So when you listen to good music and you play good music, we always have to crack a beer. So let's talk about favorite craft breweries in Missouri that you love to go to.
Oh boy, same thing. The best beers out there aren't being sold at your local convenience store, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a couple of really nice breweries here in Columbia, and one of the brewmeisters downtown at one of my favorite breweries here in Columbia is the Broadway Brewery, and the brewmaster down there is putting out some really good stuff these days, and I like a good heavy dark beer. I like Guinness is one of my favorites. So the stouts are good for me.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about the hops. The hoppy beers kind of give me a kind of heartburn feeling, which I don't like. And but there's several lagers that I really enjoy, some pilsners that I really enjoy. I love the German Hefeweizens, something that's got a lot of body, a lot of character. I really enjoy that kind of thing.
Okay, so let's just say in Missouri, if you had 3 breweries you were going to do a shout out to, why don't you go ahead and just throw some, yeah, 3.
Okay, number one,
from the
Broadway Brewery right here in Columbia.
Okay.
Number 2, I'd probably go Boulevard, which is in Kansas City. There's a lot of good stuff there, and they're kind of all over the place. Number 3, honestly, Thom, I'm going to leave the state of Missouri, and I'm going to throw Yuengling on the table. Those guys are doing some incredible stuff out of Pottsville, PA. Hats off to my friend and yours, the one and only Master Sergeant Terry Kegris. And so if I could have a Yuengling distributor right here in Boone County, I'd be all over that in a heartbeat.
Well, so it's interesting. I know they're changing their business dynamic a little bit, but so they used to never sell Yuengling west of the Mississippi.
That's right.
That was their thing. So I had a buddy that he was my OIC. I was the NCOIC of a maritime operations detachment in Colorado. He was from Pennsylvania, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so excited! My uncle's coming up for Christmas." Blah blah blah. And I said, "Tell that bastard I'll give him money when he gets here. Bring me Yuengling." And he's like, "Great idea. We'll get 2 cases of Yuengling up here." Well, I don't know what it was wintertime, so it was completely cool. It was in the back of his truck, but cool all the way from Pennsylvania to Colorado. And he got there, and we cracked the top on it, and we started drinking because we were excited. We were like, "Yeah, we got Yuengling." And the first one, I was like, "Man, this tastes skunky," like we were like, "Let's try the next case," or something like that, and or something. Let's open up another 12-pack. We'll do it that way. And we did it again. And all we could come up with is the fact that it left and went up elevation, that it caused something to go wrong with the bottling, and it went sour, the whole beer. It was crazy. I was like, "Man, what a disappointment." Yeah. And I'm like, well, maybe that's why they don't sell it west of the Mississippi. I don't know.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
I had no idea, but yeah, we were up higher. We're higher than Denver there in Colorado Springs. We're at 6,500, but I lived up the higher side, so I was probably even higher than that. So coming from whatever they are in Pennsylvania, like 1,500 feet above sea level to that's 6,500 feet, something happened to it. I don't know biology that well. I mean, I know it a little bit, but I don't know what happened. But so yeah, that's crazy but it is a great, fantastic beer. So
yep.
I'm gonna have to find some of that.
Oh, Yuengling? Yeah. Well, and I don't know what the dynamic is there too, but we have a Kemper alumni named John Reardon that opened up a brewery out of Dallas in the alum district, and he called it Deep Alum. I've never had the beer. Now, he sold the brewery, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but it seemed like some stuff that I read, after he sold it, he disagreed with the direction that the company was going. I don't know too much about it. Like I said, these are just social media posts. I don't try to put too much stock because it may have just been a moment of passion and he was just pissed off because it was a bad meeting or whatever. I don't know. It's not my.
If I may, and I've been to the Deep Ellum Brewery in Deep Ellum, Texas, which is in the heart of Dallas. My wife and I and youngest daughter stopped there on our way to Port Aransas last year on a vacation. John was gracious enough to come in and shake hands and sit down, and we had a great conversation. And he was in the process of transitioning out of selling the brewery over to a group that were in the process of buying him out. And not to speak for him either, but I would agree that he would probably tell you that the culture of the company was different than what he had envisioned to begin with. And he's although disappointed or sorry that he's still not associated, he's ready to move on with new ventures.
Yeah. And I think he's still, in some way, manufacturing, producing alcohol just with that brewery anymore.
Yeah,
I don't know too much about it, but he's
got the Deep Ellum distillery now.
Yeah.
And he's working with craft vodkas and whiskey and a variety of other things. So he's staying busy.
That seems a little more Texas to me too. I mean, Texas is so inundated with that Shiner Bock. It's hard to go outside of that. So you might have a better market with the hard liquors than you would with trying to get the boys to let up on their Shiner Bock.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of craft out there. There's a lot of good craft beer out here. It really is.
No, I know. I'm just giving it a hard time. I know. So now let's go back into Kemper. Let's talk about, I have some in my mind, but I just want to hear yours, and then I'm going to segue into what I think. What are the most, in your mind, the most historical events happened at Kemper while you were there and in your what were the three most historical things that you think happened or that you were a part of or you got to witness while at Kemper?
The first one that comes to mind is September 11th of 2001 when the towers came down. And I was, back then, again, this is pre-cell phone communications, and I carried a walkie-talkie style radio whenever I was beating feet out on campus. And I remember Sandy Challender calling over the radio saying something bad is happening. And the admin team was going to gather together upstairs we had a second story conference room in the admin building, which has now been taken down, that had a television with a cable connection so we could watch the live news feed and see what was going on. And we had some students on campus that were from the New York area. And I remember going into academic and calling all the students out into the hallway and announcing to them what was going on in New York. And we tried to make sure that each student that had family in the area had an opportunity to try to reach out to them and make sure that they were all okay. The second memory that immediately leaps to mind is, you might remember this, Thom, the junior college cadets in the ROTC program. They had a fraternity known as Scabbard and Blade. Remember that?
Yep, I do.
Well, there were two cadets that were college students now that started out as high school students, one by the name of Paul Oliver. Paul came to Kemper as a 7th grader, and he went all the way through. He's one of the few that started in the 7th grade and went all the way through his second year of college before he took his commission and went off to serve his country. And the second one was a cadet named Paul Simonich. And both Paul Oliver and Simonich, I think both of them live in the St. Louis area now. And I refer to them euphemistically as Simonich and Oliver. Well, Paul and Paul were Scabbard and Blade cadets. And as a tribute to the school, they ran a flag up the pole on the roof of D barracks. There was a flagpole that looked out over the court that had an electric powered light that kept it lit at night, and it was an all weather flag. And the day that they raised that flag, they were both up there in their Class A uniforms, and they had the dark blue. Is it a 44 button coat?
It was
Okay,
44.
the 44 button blue coat, and they had the dark blue pants and black shoes. They had the Class A headgear, and those two guys were standing on the concrete border on which the flagpole was mounted. And they had another cadet up there that ran the flag up the pole while both of those guys were at present arms. And the whole Corps of Cadets was down on the court watching these guys run that flag up the pole. And it was absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. I mean, just brings tears to my eyes thinking about it. It was wonderful. And that's got to be number two. And, I'd have to fish pretty long to find a third one that leaps to mind. There's just so many different interactions that I've had with students and parents and staff.
I'll fill the space there with some pop culture among Kemper. Were you there when they filmed Child's Play 3?
Yes, I was. In fact, I interrupted the film set on more than one occasion because I had work to do.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I'm assuming like that had to be a very difficult process, because how long did the filming take? I'm assuming
it was several weeks. And you remember the ramp that went down from the court past Math Hall down to Science Hall?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm coming out of Science Hall, and there's cadets that are supposed to be in class and they're not, and I'm on my way to go fetch them and say, hey, get your ass to class. And I come walking up that ramp and come around the corner, and they're shooting something on the steps of Math Hall, and I walk up there and the director goes, cut! I'm looking around going, he goes, what are you doing? I said, dude, I'm running a school. I cut right through his movie set to go on and do what needed to do. That was so much fun.
Yeah, I figured that was probably a very stressful time for anybody that was trying to like actually get real work done.
Oh yeah, the cadets loved it because it was like 2.5, 3 weeks of recess,
Yeah. Also, and Dave, you might be able to remember this. We're better than me with dates, and I don't know. Were you there when the mess hall shooting occurred?
Oh, that was the year after I left.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, Greg, were you there or were you on hiatus at that time?
That I was on hiatus when that happened.
Okay, all right. I didn't know if you knew anything about that per se.
No, I wasn't on campus when that took place. It was a tragic set of circumstances, domestic trouble between a person that was working in the mess hall and her estranged spouse, and unfortunately, she lost her life that day.
Yeah, I always kind of wondered what kind of, I guess maybe, Dave, that's something else to like consider. Maybe we talk to some cadets around that, because it'd be interesting to see what the feelings were post-wake of an active shooter situation amongst the cadets, and that was my only inquisitive thought behind it. Is like, okay, I wondered, modern day psychology, we would have everybody being evaluated and talking about their feelings and all that stuff. And back then we were a little more macho and we're like, get over it. It's over. Yeah, dude was crazy, whatever. So it would be weird to see if people can recall feelings of what they actually were feeling, if they were frightened to be a student or whatever, It was more of I don't know how many people were actually even exposed to it. I don't know much about the incident itself because I wasn't.
As I recall, and again, I wasn't there, but I think it was a midday event. The cadets were in class. It was prior to second mess. The biggest question mark would be, how could a dude just walk on campus with a shotgun and march into the mess hall and do what he did without someone accosting him from where he parked on 3rd Street and where he ended up in the kitchen?
Yeah, without anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is weird. Yeah, anyway. Let's talk about, if you got them, if you can think of them, what's 3 of your most personally rewarding experiences from the school? And it could be as arbitrary as having a blockhead as a student and you finally taught him something and he got it, it snapped and bing, light bulb went on, or something just extremely extraordinary. I don't know. What do you feel they would be?
I think my first instinct is to just is to say that the cadets that tried to play the "I'm going to fail at Kemper" card as a way of trying to get their parents to bring them home, getting them to a point where they realize that, number one, that's not a good hand to play, and number two, when they realized that they would better serve themselves, their present and their future, by just doing the best they could with the circumstances, as challenging as they may have been, and seeing that transition play out. I used to tell mom and dad when they were bringing their students to school that Kemper was an environment, and again, I'm speaking really mainly to the junior high and high school student population. The junior college cadets were there because they wanted to be. They were either 2-year commissioning students, or they were athletes, or they were day students, right? So the JUCO cadets, and they didn't have the same parental pressure to come there in the first place. They made their decision, and then they lived it out. The 14-year-old high school freshmen, totally different ball game, and watching them come to a spot where they not only were successful academically, but they were being rewarded for that success, not only in the classroom, but in the barracks. And they were learning that this community of adolescents, as difficult as it could be for a short period of time, eventually became an environment where real freedom, independence, and autonomy could be realized at a time in their lives when their peers back home, their peers back home had no idea what that looked like. So and back to what I was saying to mom and dad, is like, look, Kemper's a place that's either going to suck you in or blow you out. There really is no middle ground. If it sucks you in, these guys are blood brothers until they draw their last breath, and they're all over the planet, and they're still connected in a way that none of us can fully understand because of what they've been through together. And that bond of camaraderie, it still gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. I mean, it was magic, and I just love having a front row seat. I loved having a front row seat.
It was a truly remarkable place and time, in not just individuals' lives, but in the world.
Yeah, you're living in a concrete building with tile floors and box and big ass fans at the end of the hall, no AC. You talk about Spartan conditions, no air conditioning in the class. Your forearms are sticking a notebook paper in the classroom. Just crazy.
Yeah, I forgot about how ungodly hot it was there in the summer. Holy crap.
Yes.
I remember I was working there one summer, and I would sneak into the teacher's lounge and open the refrigerator just to put my head in there, just to cool air, or into the freezer. God, it was or the staff and faculty lounge. I mean, off of.
Hey, let me go back to my favorite number 3 real quick, can I? My number 3 just came to mind. Okay, do you remember we had a pool table in the faculty lounge?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Well, when I first started, the pool table we had in there was a 7-footer. And it was a good table, and we enjoyed playing on it, we being me and several of the other members of the teaching staff. And one day we walked in, this was back when Dr. Stewart was the president. And I remember walking into the faculty lounge one day, and the pool table was gone. I'm like, where the hell did that thing go? And just poking around, asking questions here and there, came to find out that Dr. Stewart had sold the table to someone who made him an offer. And so he sold the table, and they hired someone to come in over the weekend and take it out of there. And I'm like, holy cow, come on. So I recalled from looking at some picture books that back in the day, like I'm talking early 1900s, there were at least 2 8-foot tables that had the big elephant's feet, burled walnut, mother of pearl inlay. I mean, talking 3/4 inch, 3-piece slate. I mean, the real deal.
Yeah, like all like the better part of 3 tons as well.
Yeah, no kidding. And there were rumors that one of these tables was still stored somewhere on campus. It had been taken down and been put away. And so Sergeant Kegris and we decided we're going to find that damn table. And we figured there was at least one. So we go after school, we go into what was then known as Math Hall. It's now known as the Library Learning Center. But back then, Math Hall had a indoor rifle range on the 2nd floor where the cadets practiced 25-yard air pellet firing. And down below in the lower level was just a ton of stuff that it was turned into a gigantic storage area. And so Terry and I go in there, and we're digging around, and lo and behold, holy shit, can I say that on this podcast?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
You bet.
Yeah.
There's a side rail. There's the 2 feet. There's the other 2 feet. There's the 3-piece slate. There's the leather pockets. There's all the hardware. We found the whole damn thing disassembled in the back of science of Math Hall. So we carry all of those upstairs to the rifle range, which no one was using anymore, and just laid the pieces out to look at them. Well, one of the admin guys was a dude named Tim Elward. If you remember Mr. Elward, he was a cadet himself. He was a company commander when he was a college student. He came through high school there as well, so he knew both sides of the aisle from that perspective. And he was also known to refinish furniture. And so I just went into Tim's office and said, Tim, we found this table. What do you suggest on how we refit? He said, go get some whatever you put on wood to remove old varnish and tar and all the other crap, stripping agent basically. So we went and got some stripping agent, and we poured that on the side rails. Terry and I did, and with paper towels wiped it off. And have you seen the movie the Titanic? Okay, remember the scene in the Titanic at the very beginning when they take you down under the ocean and you see the gutted, rusted, nasty remains of the ship?
Yep.
They take you in it, and then all of a sudden it comes back to life, and there's this like transformation before your eyes where all of a sudden now it's back to its ornate beauty.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened when we put this finishing stuff on this pool table. And we stripped that thing off, and both of us, I wiped that off with my right hand, and we both looked at that and we were like, holy shit, look at that. And so we stripped the whole thing down, and then we finished it in gunstock oil. That was Mr. Elward's recommendation. We finished it in gunstock oil. I'm going to tell you what, my friend, it was absolutely gorgeous. And I convinced Dr. Stewart to let us hire the A.E. Schmidt Billiard Company right here in Columbia, Missouri, to build us new rails, new pockets, and put this table together. And they put that table right back where the old one was in the faculty land. And it was an 8-footer. It was the full-on legitimate table, and we played on that thing all the way until the school closed. And some dude got it for $5,000 at the auction. It was worth $15,000 for sure.
I was gonna say that much walnut alone, or oh dear God.
It was beautiful, beautiful.
I'm getting a hernia just thinking about it. God, having to move that thing, what a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, I tell the folk anytime I get a chance to play pool, and I still love the game. Tony Davis really taught me how to play. Sergeant Davis was an ROTC, a JROTC instructor, and he worked side by side with Sergeant Keggers for a number of years. And Tony really taught me how to play. He was very, very good. And there was a small group of us that we played 3 times a day, every day for 5 years. We got to school early so we could shoot pool before first hour. We ate early so we could shoot over second mess, and we stayed after school every day to play as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you guys yeah, well, and on an 8-foot table, the game changes. I mean, you're not playing pool. It's straight up billiards at that point. Exactly. I mean, it's a different world. So
yeah.
Every fraction of a miscalculation is
huge,
amplified by 10 on a table.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's no way to fake that. Yeah, the smallest miscalculation can have dire consequences on that much real estate. So
yeah.
What do you think? Yeah, let's talk about some vulnerable experiences. What set you back? You know, what are some experiences that you had where you're like, man, I didn't sign up for this, you know, or that was a lot to deal with?
Yeah, two things right off the top of my head. Number one, there was a high school kid, and if it's okay to is it okay to name names?
Yep.
His name was Ken Satrio, and he was from the Philippines. Ken was a fantastic classical guitar player. If you could hear him play, Bon Jovi's Dead or Alive.
Yep.
He could play that intro spotless, and he could play the whole thing, lead, riffs, everything. He was a fantastic guitar player. And he was an older high school student. In fact, I think when this occurrence happened, he was 20 and was still in high school and needed to pass Major Palkovic's English 4 class in order to graduate. And he was worried about not passing the final. And he was in Major Palkovic's 4th hour English 4 class, which you might remember is right before second mess. And there was a bathroom on the 4th floor of Science Hall, right outside of Major Palkovic's room. And so when the bell sounded and the cadets were heading back to the barracks to drop their gear and report to the court for formation, Satrio hid in the bathroom. And when the floor was clear, he had already prepared to open. You might also remember this, that Major Palkovic's room had 2 doors, one of them that opened in the hallway right by the stairwell, and the other one opened into the hallway adjacent to the remaining rooms on that same floor. Well, Satrio had unlocked the door that would let him in from the hallway, not the one by the stairwell, but the one by the rest of the classrooms. And when the room was clear, the floor was clear, or at least he thought it was, he let himself back inside Major Palkovic's room to find the key to final exam. And when there were 2 teachers that were still on the floor, Ken didn't know this, but they were still on the floor. And when they walked by Major Palkovic's room, they saw him in there from the window of the room, of the door that he entered. And he knew that they saw him, and it startled him, and he was a little nervous. So not the smartest move, but Ken actually climbed out of the window and hung from the window ledge by his fingertips to hide. And it was a cool, drizzly day. And you remember the pit at the bottom of Science Hall? So those large concrete pillar or pylons that covered the expanse of that pit.
Yep.
Well, because he was getting weak in his fingers, he started kicking the window of 3rd floor, trying to get himself a foothold. He broke the window, lost his grip, and fell, and hit that cross beam. Fortunately, if he hadn't done that, he probably would have died that day. But the cross beam broke his fall, and he landed in the pit of the stairwell. And his teeth were laying on the ground in a pool of blood. He shattered his mandible. Again, he survived. They took him to the hospital and wired his teeth shut. But we had an ambulance on the floor on campus that day, hauling Ken Satrio out of the basement of Science Hall and taking him off to the hospital. That was a very, very shocking event that I remember like it was yesterday. But again, he did recover, and they wired his teeth shut, and he did experience a full recovery, thank goodness.
I remember hearing about that.
Otherwise,
that's a pretty deep one.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you were. I mean, I guess as a kid, you're always hard on your parents, and you never understand that while kids are growing up, parents are growing up too. And I can only imagine that from the perspective of a teacher as well. It's not like you got an instruction book of how to do this. You got guidelines and stuff, but yeah, from that point of how do I deal with this on a personal level? Because that shit was real. I mean, like, it really happened. That's some heavy stuff, you know? I mean, like, that's a lot to carry, you know, and whatever for everybody across the board, I think. So yeah, that's a lot to process.
And I think otherwise, you know, from a day-to-day perspective, I think the biggest challenge for me as I'm thinking through the mind of my experience as an administrator now. I remember one day sitting on the the inner court in the admin space, the admin building in the inner court where you would stand to kind of address the cadets in formation.
Yep.
I remember sitting there one day and watching the students go by. This was right after lunch, and they were on their way to fifth period. And I just remember feeling like I bit off more than I can chew. That I was managing more of the daily affairs of the students under my watch than I needed to. And I had this idea, so this was a false conclusion on my part as a young administrator, but I had this idea that if there was a problem, I was supposed to solve it, which is a misnomer. That's not necessarily always true, especially if you're building a team that's working together towards the same objective. It's not always up to whoever's quote unquote in charge to solve the problem. Others are capable of doing the same, and if we surround ourselves with the right folks and strong personalities, we can get this done together. I'm not a lone ranger, and it took me a while to figure that out. But I remember a teacher came to me and was talking about a problem she was having with a student, and for the first time, the question came to me, and I asked her this out loud. It was a game changer for me. Are you telling me this because you want me to do something about it, or are you telling me this because you just want me to know? And if it's just because you want me to know, I'm going to hear you and acknowledge, okay, I get it. And if it's because you want me to do something about it, then that's going to change the course of our conversation. And that singular moment altered the way that I managed myself as an administrator, and I didn't feel like I was carrying the bulk of the weight by myself, because I was the only guy that was managing the junior high and high school students and the teachers. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm thinking, holy crap, I need to apply that to my own life right now. I'm like learning shit. I need to write this down, man. Holy crap. That was mind blowing in my own way. I'm going to have to put that in my toolbox, man. Holy crap.
Do so.
Well, we have been rattling on here for a little bit, but let's just talk about some future stuff. I am fully anticipating you're going to join us in October.
I will. Yep, I'll be there.
Alrighty, we are looking forward to it. Oh, how yeah, I guess we talked a little bit, but yeah, the brewery. Did you guys stop by Kegris's brewery and try out some of those craft beers while you're in Colorado there?
We did, and I'm sorry that I wasn't there the same time you were. And you know, Mary Arden is one of my she'll be near and dear to my heart as long as I'm alive. And I'm sorry that I missed a chance to see her. But yeah, Christy and I really enjoyed our time at the Black Forest Bistro. I tried one of those old fashions that Amanda's famous for, and it was fantastic. Dinner was great. Service was exceptional. And Terry and Amanda are wonderful, wonderful house hosts, and we always look forward to seeing them. Christy and I try to get out there at least once a year, and if not, it's every other year.
Yeah. I did not have the opportunity. I had to drive home to try out one of her old fashions, but yeah, I mean, the only problem is with old fashions is, man, how much sugar, you really get a headache the next day.
Yeah.
There's no way to. You gotta pound water and some Advil before going to bed, or you'll wake up with a smoking headache. So yeah.
Absolutely. Hydration is key.
Well, and it's like adding that sugar to it is like, it's like compound interest on the hangover, man. It's just that bad boy. It's just gonna go. It's yeah, it's a different world in itself. Yeah. I had time out there. Yeah, and I saw that you were down in Eureka Springs here not too long ago with Lester, actually Gibson, right? And yeah, I saw you're keeping up with the local community there.
Lester and Jamie are in Springfield, and Scott, of course, is in Eureka. And for those that are listening, if you ever get a chance to get in for a treat, if you do, it's a unique store right there on Main or Center Street, and it's right in the heart of historic downtown Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And Scott would love to see you come in and sample what he's got coming out the door. It's very, very good, and you will not be disappointed for sure. So, and again, that's just another example of the connection that we have with each other that lasts a long, long time. I've known Lester since he was 15, and Scott since he was 14, and there you have it. There you are.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Dave, I'm done with my part. Do you got anything?
No, I'm good. I think it's been a really good conversation. I think it's been a really good time. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to enjoy all the different perspectives that we shared. I'm going to go ahead and close out the podcast, and just want to give thank you guys, thank you Thom, thank you Greg for joining us on the podcast. Thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate you guys. You can find us on the web at KemperOldBoyNetwork.com. Please be sure to register so we can keep you in the loop of all the latest events, all the latest episodes, and any other KOBN news. If you have a question or a comment or a story that you'd like to share or like to air it with us, you can reach us at 660-596-6422. Just leave a message there, and you can leave a story, or just leave us your number. We'll call you back. My name is David Flores. We want to thank you guys for joining us. God bless you. And remember, always stay non-quam, non-prati.
Hey.